As Studebaker entered the 1960s, they needed a replacement for their dated Gran Turismo Hawk, a real halo car, and so the Avanti was rushed into production, introduced in April of 1962. The Avanti name indicating its forward thinking. Studebaker was already more than 100 years old at the time and had been building cars for 60 years, and the new Avanti shared its platform with the 3-year-old Lark, including its 109-inch wheelbase. It was just over 192 inches long, weighing in at just over 3,000 pounds. Styling was futuristic inside and out, with its grille-less bottom-breathing fiberglass body and being the first production American car to use caliper-type front disc brakes. Prices started at around $4,500, or about the same as a Buick Riviera, or $1,000 less than a Corvette. The base R1 engine was Studebaker's 4.7-liter, 289 cubic inch V8 in 240 horsepower jet thrust tune, and a Paxton supercharger was optional as the R2 package, increasing output to 290. They also built a handful of R3 models with a blown 335 horsepower, 305 cubic inch V8, an R4 with a dual quad 305 and 280 horsepower, and an R5 with dual blowers pulling 575 horsepower from the 305. At introduction, the Avanti was the world's fastest production car, officially reaching 178 miles an hour and setting a total of 29 world land speed records and 72 Bonneville speed records. It also did 60 in about 8 seconds and the quarter mile in the high 15s, respectable for the time considering its relatively small V8. In spite of its trimmer dimensions and superior performance, Studebaker marketed it as a personal luxury coupe to compete with the Ford Thunderbird, instead of as a GT like its predecessor. But they were able to sell them as fast as they could make them, at least to start with, which wasn't very fast, not having committed the production facilities due to delays caused by early production teething issues, in spite of plans for much greater production. Less than 6,000 were built before production stopped at the end of 1963, including just over 864 models with updated headlight assemblies. The company planned to restart production in Canada in 1965, but instead they sold the Indiana plant, tooling, and rights to the Avanti and the Studebaker pickup trucks to a couple of local dealers who created Avanti motors and Studebaker truck parts. The Avanti II began production for 1965 using the Corvette's 300 gross horsepower 327 V8, and 60 came in around 9 seconds. All cars were built to order, with prices starting at nearly $7,000, roughly $60,000 today. But build quality was improved from the original, according to critics of the time. Options were plentiful, from Hurst shifter to air conditioning to leather interior to limited slip differential to tinted windows to AM/FM stereo, and you could order it in any color you wanted, and at least at the beginning, a Paxton supercharger could still be added. Only 21 Avanti IIs were built the first year, climbing to around 100 annually once production settled in. 1969 saw the 327 transition to a 350, still rated at 300 gross horsepower. In 1972, they upgraded to Chevy's small block 400 with the transition to net horsepower, giving it a rating of around 180, or down about 10. A 1976 interior update, mostly to the switches, was forced by safety regulation, and prices were now around $12,000. The 350 would return in 1977, also with 180 horsepower, but less torque. In 1981, it would be reduced to an 155 horsepower, 305 cubic inch 5-liter V8, but production had nearly doubled by this time. In 1982, the company was sold, and a convertible was added to the lineup, although very few were made, and prices climbed to $30,000 to start. Starting in 1984, a GT version with the higher output 5-liter from the IROC Z became optional, raising horsepower to 190 and then 205 the following year. It was also around this time that the original Studebaker chassis was replaced by a modified GM chassis sourced from the Monte Carlo, as well as new rectangular headlights. And for 1985, it also got the Corvette's aluminum rear axle and independent rear suspension. But in spite of production climbing to around 300 annually, the company was bankrupt by 1986. New owners and state subsidies acquired by moving production to Ohio kept production going, and the 2 designation was dropped. With the death of the rear-wheel drive Monte Carlo at the end of 1987, Avanti got another new chassis for 1988, sourced from the Caprice Classic. This allowed new models to be offered, including a 117-inch wheelbase luxury coupe, a 123-inch wheelbase four-door sedan, and an 127-inch wheelbase limousine. Production dates for these models are sketchy, but a total of only 40 luxury coupes and 90 four-doors were built, and there may not have been more than 1 or 2 limos. Also for 1988, there were 25 silver anniversary coupes with a Paxton supercharger, increasing output to 250. The Corvette 350 returned for 1991, producing 245 horsepower, but they only managed to produce 15 cars that year, mostly convertibles. And for the years that followed, Avanti only existed to provide parts and service. But that was not the end. The company would again change hands in 1999 and would move to Georgia, where production of a new design began for 2000. The look was both more modern and closer to its original design. In 2003, Avanti showed the XUV prototype based on the Hummer H2, but a production version never materialized, partly because the GM partnership was swapped for a Ford partnership. And 2004 models moved to a Mustang-based drivetrain, including a V6 for the first time. In 2005, the company relocated yet again, this time to Cancun, Mexico, and supposedly only one 2006 Avanti was made, a V6 model, before the owner was arrested and the company was closed. Speculation of yet another revival continued for a number of years, but assets were sold off in 2011, putting an end to the car that wouldn't die, having survived 40 years beyond Studebaker's 1966 demise. Although Studebaker produced more 63 models than were produced in Avanti's 30 independent productive years. Whether you consider the Avanti a continuation of Studebaker or as its own entity, it certainly is an interesting part of American automobile history. As always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment below and like and subscribe.